Wren Bennett climbed aboard the sleek white yacht, tugging her duffel bag over her shoulder as she exhaled in relief. "Finally," she muttered, stepping onto the polished deck. The past hour had been a whirlwind. Her best friend had invited her last minute for a weekend getaway, but between the chaotic marina and the sea of identical luxury boats, Wren had nearly given up on finding the right one. She glanced around, expecting to see familiar faces, but instead she was met with the sight of an empty, pristine deck. Strange. "Hello," she called out hesitantly. A deep voice answered from behind her. "I think you're on the wrong yacht." Wren spun around, her breath catching as she took in the man standing before her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and effortlessly commanding, dressed in a crisp white button-down with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. His sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes made her stomach do an unexpected flip. What?" she stammered, gripping the strap of her bag. "This isn't a chartered vessel," the man said, crossing his arms over his chest. "It's private." Her eyes widened. "Oh my God." "You mean this isn't the yacht for the Harper party?" His lips twitched, as if trying not to laugh. "Not unless I suddenly started hosting strangers without knowing it." Wren groaned, pressing a hand to her forehead. "I am so sorry, the marina is a nightmare and I must have," she exhaled sharply. "I'll just leave." But before she could take a step, a sudden gust of wind blew through the dock, and with a horrifying crack, the gangway connecting the yacht to the pier snapped loose. The boat rocked slightly as the connection between the vessel and the dock was severed. Wren's eyes widened in panic. "Oh no, 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 no," the man sighed, rubbing his temple. "Well, that complicates things." "Complicates things?" Her voice rose. "I need to get off this boat." He pulled out his phone, letting out a low breath. "The crew's onshore running errands. The gangway's busted, and without it, you're stuck until we can dock again." Wren stared at him in disbelief. "You're kidding." "I wish I were." He slid his phone into his pocket. "I'm Declan Lawson, by the way." Wren barely processed the name as she paced the deck. "This is insane." "I was supposed to meet my friend for a weekend trip, not." Declan leaned against the railing, watching her with amusement. "Not accidentally stow away on a millionaire's yacht." Her head snapped up. "You're a millionaire," he arched a brow. "You stepped onto a 100-foot yacht." "What did you expect?" She opened her mouth, then shut it. "Fair point," Declan sighed. "Look, we'll head back once the captain returns. In the meantime, you might as well relax." Relax on a stranger's yacht? Absolutely not. But before she could protest, a voice crackled over the yacht's radio. "Mr. Lawson, the marina is overbooked for the next few hours. We can't dock again until later this evening." Declan pinched the bridge of his nose. "Perfect." Wren groaned. "So I'm stuck here." "Looks like it." Declan's lips twitched again. "Hope you don't mind expensive champagne and ocean views." She threw her hands up. "Unbelievable." An hour later, Wren sat stiffly on one of the yacht's plush lounge chairs, sipping a glass of water while Declan scrolled through his phone across from her. "This is the most ridiculous thing that's ever happened to me," she muttered. Declan glanced up. "You say that like it's a bad thing." She shot him a look. "I crashed your boat." "I've had worse guests," she sighed, setting her glass down. "You don't seem particularly fazed by any of this," he shrugged. "I've learned to roll with the unexpected." Something about the way he said it made her curious. "Is that a rich person thing?" he chuckled. "No, just a me thing." Wren studied him. Declan was intriguing. He wasn't just some arrogant millionaire flaunting his wealth. He was composed, confident, and frustratingly unbothered by the fact that a stranger had stumbled onto his yacht. Before she could pry further, a crew member finally returned. "The gangway's being fixed, but it'll take a few more hours," he informed Declan. Declan nodded, then turned to Wren. "Looks like you're stuck with me a little longer." Wren groaned, but to her surprise, she didn't entirely hate the idea. By sunset, Wren found herself actually enjoying Declan's company. He wasn't just some cold businessman, he had a dry sense of humor, an easy way of making conversation feel effortless. As they stood by the railing, watching the sun dip into the horizon, Declan glanced at her. So, Wren Bennett, what do you do when you're not boarding the wrong yachts? She laughed. I'm an illustrator. He looked intrigued. What kind? Children's books, she admitted. It's not exactly glamorous, but I love it. Declan nodded thoughtfully. Loving what you do is better than glamour, she studied him. And you, what do you do besides own expensive yachts? His lips curved slightly. Investments, real estate, boring millionaire things. She rolled her eyes. Of course. They fell into a comfortable silence, the ocean breeze playing with Wren's hair. For a moment, she almost forgot she was supposed to be somewhere else. Declan tilted his head. You know, for someone who made a mistake, you don't seem too miserable. She hesitated, then smiled. I guess there are worse places to be stuck. His gaze lingered on her, something unreadable in his expression. Yeah, he said quietly. There are. And for the first time since stepping onto the wrong yacht, Wren wasn't entirely sure she wanted to leave. As the yacht gently rocked beneath her feet, Wren leaned against the railing, her fingers tracing the cool metal absent-mindedly. The initial anxiety of being trapped on the wrong boat had faded, replaced by something far more unsettling and undeniable awareness of the man standing beside her. Declan had a way of commanding attention without trying. He wasn't overbearing or boastful, yet there was an undeniable presence about him, something steady and unwavering. She could feel his gaze on her, studying her with the same quiet intensity he had carried all evening. You're thinking too hard, he observed. She turned her head slightly. Excuse me, he gestured toward her fingers, still tracing the railing. You do that when you're lost in thought. She pulled her hand back, resisting the urge to cross her arms. I didn't realize I was being analyzed. A hint of amusement flickered across his features. I'm just observant. Wren exhaled, staring out at the darkening horizon. I was just thinking about how ridiculous this whole situation is. If you told me this morning that I'd be stuck on a stranger's yacht, I would have laughed in your face. Funny how life works, Declan said, his voice measured. Sometimes the best things happen by accident. She glanced at him, searching his face for any hint of sarcasm, but he looked completely serious. The weight of his words pressed against something deep within her, something she wasn't ready to examine. Before she could respond, a faint chime sounded from inside the yacht. Declan pushed off the railing. Dinner's ready. Wren blinked. Dinner? I had the chef prepare something. She eyed him warily. You just assumed I'd be staying long enough for a meal, he shrugged. You've been here for hours. Might as well eat. She hesitated, but her stomach betrayed her with a low grumble. Declan's lips twitched, and she sighed in resignation. Fine, but only because I'm starving. Inside, the dining area was impossibly elegant. A long, polished table sat beneath a chandelier, the lighting casting a soft glow over the space. A single-place setting had been arranged across from Declan's, and a delicate aroma of spices filled the air. She slid into the chair cautiously. This feels a little too fancy for an accidental dinner. Declan lifted a glass of wine. I don't do things halfway. The meal was exquisite plates of seared fish, roasted vegetables, and a delicate sauce she couldn't name but wanted to bottle up and take home. Despite her initial hesitation, conversation flowed easily between them. At one point, she set her fork down and tilted her head. All right, I have to ask, how did you end up like this? His brow lifted. Like what? Rich, owning yachts. Talking about life's unexpected surprises like some kind of philosopher. A low chuckle escaped him. I worked for it. She arched a brow, waiting for more. Declan leaned back slightly, his gaze thoughtful. I started with nothing. My family wasn't wealthy. Everything I have now, I built. Wren studied him, sensing there was more beneath the carefully measured words. And that makes you happy. A flicker of something unreadable passed through his eyes. It gives me control. Her lips parted slightly, but before she could press further, Declan's phone vibrated against the table. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting into something unreadable. Something wrong? She asked. He exhaled, setting the phone face down. Just business. She didn't believe him. Before she could decide whether to push, Declan redirected the conversation. What about you? You said earlier that you love what you do. She leaned back, considering. I do, but it's not easy. Freelance work isn't exactly stable and the industry is competitive. Yet you still do it, she met his gaze. Because I'd rather struggle doing what I love than be miserable doing something safe. His expression softened slightly. That's admirable, she laughed, shaking her head. That's one word for it. Declan's phone vibrated again, and this time he didn't look at it. Instead, he reached for the wine bottle, pouring more into her glass. Tell me something, he said, voice lower now. If you could do anything, absolutely anything, no limits, what would it be? She hesitated, caught off guard by the question. I guess I'd want my own studio, a space where I could create without worrying about deadlines or whether my next project will pay the bills. Declan considered this. What's stopping you? She exhaled. Money, stability, reality. He didn't look convinced. Sometimes reality is just an excuse. She narrowed her eyes. Easy to say when you have more money than you know what to do with. A ghost of a smile played at his lips. Fair point. Something about the way he looked at her made her pulse quicken. There was an intensity there, something unreadable but undeniably magnetic. She was beginning to understand the kind of man Declan Lawson was, someone used to getting what he wanted. And for some reason she had the distinct feeling that, tonight, what he wanted was her. The sound of footsteps interrupted the moment. A crew member entered, clearing his throat. Sir, the gangway has been repaired. We're ready to dock whenever you'd like. Wren's stomach twisted unexpectedly. Declan nodded, his expression unreadable. Thank you. The crew member left and silence settled between them. Well, Wren said, forcing a lightness into her tone, looks like my accidental adventure is over. Declan didn't respond immediately. Then finally, are you sure? Her breath caught. What do you mean? He leaned forward slightly. You could stay. The words hung between them, suspended in the air like something fragile and dangerous all at once. Wren's heart pounded. Declan, I don't mean forever, he said smoothly. Just a little longer. She swallowed hard. Every logical part of her screamed that this was insane, but a quieter, more reckless part of her, the part that had let herself enjoy tonight more than she should have, was considering it. She should say no, she knew that, and yet. Give me one good reason, she whispered. Declan's gaze darkened, his voice low and steady. Because I don't think either of us wants this night to end. Her pulse thrummed wildly, and against all better judgment, she wasn't sure she did either. Wren stared at Declan, the weight of his words pressing against her chest like the rolling tide. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was absurd. She had met this man only hours ago, and yet something about him made the rest of the world blur at the edges. She should say no. She should thank him for the unexpected evening and walk away. But something in Declan's expression, something unguarded and rare, made it impossible for her to move. I don't know if that's a good idea, she murmured. Declan held her gaze, his voice steady. Maybe not. But I think we both know it's the truth. The quiet honesty in his tone sent a shiver through her. He wasn't playing games. He wasn't trying to charm her with empty words or grand promises. He was simply stating what they both felt, that the night had shifted into something unexpected, something neither of them had planned for. Wren exhaled, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. I have my own life, Declan. I can't just stay on a yacht with a stranger, no matter how well the evening has gone. His lips pressed together for a moment as if weighing his words. Then, after a beat, he said, Then let me change that. She frowned. Change what? The stranger part. Her breath caught at the way he said it, like it was the simplest solution in the world, like all she had to do was let him in, and suddenly this wouldn't be insane anymore, but that wasn't how life worked. You don't even know me, she pointed out. Declan's expression didn't waver. I know that you love what you do, even when it's difficult. I know that you get lost in thought when you're nervous. I know that you don't trust easily, but when you do, it means something. Wren's pulse quickened. That's not enough. Then let me learn more. The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. Wren swallowed hard, her mind at war with itself. Staying meant stepping into something unknown, something she had no control over. It meant risking the possibility that this night this man could unravel her in ways she wasn't prepared for. But walking away meant wondering what might have happened if she hadn't. And for the first time in a long time, Wren wasn't sure which scared her more. She inhaled deeply, her fingers brushing against the stem of her wine glass. "What exactly are you asking, Declan?" His gaze didn't waver. "Stay just for tonight." Her heart pounded. "And what happens in the morning?" "We figure that out when we get there." A part of her wanted to argue, to press for some kind of logic. But another part, the part that had never done anything reckless in her life, was tempted by the idea of simply letting go. She hesitated for a long moment, then finally, quietly, she said, "All right." Declan's expression didn't change, but something in his posture eased, as if he'd known all along that she wouldn't leave. The yacht remained anchored beneath a sky full of stars, the world outside fading into the background. For tonight, at least, Wren wasn't going anywhere. The evening stretched on, the atmosphere shifting into something softer, less charged, but no less significant. Declan led her to an outdoor seating area near the back of the yacht, where the city lights flickered in the distance. A faint breeze rolled across the water, carrying the scent of salt and something unfamiliar, something that felt like possibility. Wren pulled her knees up onto the cushioned bench, watching Declan as he poured them each another glass of wine. "Is this what you do? Spend your nights on yachts, drinking expensive wine with strangers?" Declan leaned back against the railing, his expression unreadable. "No," she arched a brow. "Then what made tonight different?" He studied her for a moment before answering. "You got on the wrong yacht." She huffed a laugh. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." There was something in his voice, something unguarded, that made her chest tighten. She glanced at him, tilting her head. "Do you always go after what you want?" Declan's gaze didn't waver. "Always." "And what happens when you don't get it?" A small pause. Then simply, "That doesn't happen." The certainty in his tone sent a shiver through her. Wren exhaled, looking out over the water. "I don't think I've ever met someone like you." Declan's voice was quiet when he said, "I could say the same." The air between them grew heavier, charged with something unspoken. Wren knew she should feel overwhelmed, but instead she felt something dangerously close to anticipation. She didn't know what the morning would bring. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. The night air carried a quiet hum over the water, the city lights flickering distantly as Wren tilted her head back against the cushioned seat. The waves lapped gently against the yacht's hull, a rhythmic pulse beneath the stillness that had settled between them. Declan sat across from her, his fingers lazily tracing the rim of his wine glass, though his attention remained fixed on her. There was a softness in his focus, something careful yet intent, as if committing every detail of her to memory. She didn't try to fill the silence. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't searching for the right thing to say, wasn't overthinking every moment or trying to predict what came next. It was an unfamiliar feeling, one she wasn't sure she wanted to lose. Declan's voice broke the quiet, steady and low. "You don't let yourself do this often, do you?" Wren turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. "Do what?" "Just exist, without planning the next step." She considered his words, rolling them over in her mind. He wasn't wrong. "I guess I've always been the type to think ahead," she admitted. "It's hard not to when you don't have a safety net." Declan studied her with a quiet intensity. "And yet you stayed." Her pulse fluttered. "I did." His fingers stilled against the glass. Why? She could have said a dozen things, that it was an impulsive decision. That the night had taken on a life of its own. That she had been caught up in the moment, swept into something too unexpected to resist. But none of those things were entirely true. Instead, she gave him the only answer that mattered. "Because I wanted to." A breath of something unreadable crossed his expression. Then he set his glass down and leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I meant what I said earlier, about figuring this out in the morning." Her chest tightened. "Declan, I know you have a life waiting for you, he continued, voice unwavering. I know this wasn't supposed to happen, but it did, and I don't want to pretend it didn't. Wren swallowed hard. I don't either. His jaw tightened slightly as if bracing for an answer he wouldn't like. Then stay, not just for tonight, her breath hitched. You don't even know what that means. I know enough. His gaze was steady, unwavering. And I know that I don't want this to end just because it wasn't planned. Wren's mind spun, her heart warring with itself. She had spent so much of her life making safe choices, mapping out every step before taking it. But Declan wasn't a step on a carefully laid path. He was something unexpected, something reckless and unknown. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure she cared. She exhaled, the words slipping from her lips before she could overthink them. Okay. Declan's expression didn't change immediately, but something in his posture eased, as if he had been waiting for those words longer than she realized. He didn't move closer, didn't overwhelm the moment with anything more than what it was. Instead, he simply nodded as if sealing something unspoken between them. And just like that, the course of her life shifted. Morning arrived in soft golden streaks, filtering through the sheer curtains of the yacht's cabin. Wren stirred, warmth pressing against her side before she blinked her eyes open. For a moment, she had forgotten where she was. Then, the scent of salt and crisp linen pulled her back to reality. Declan was next to her, his breathing even, his presence impossibly steady. He hadn't left, hadn't retreated into the distant figure she had half expected him to become in the harsh light of morning. Instead, when she shifted slightly, his arm tightened around her waist, as if instinctively keeping her close. Her chest ached at the quiet intimacy of it. She had no idea what came next, but for once she wasn't afraid to find out. The soft sway of the yacht beneath her feet was the first thing Wren noticed as she stirred awake. The second was the warmth of Declan's arm still wrapped around her, his steady breath brushing against the curve of her shoulder. For a moment, she didn't move, letting the reality of the morning settle over her. The previous night had been unexpected in every possible way, but nothing about it felt like a mistake. If anything, it felt inevitable. She slowly turned her head, taking in Declan's sleeping form beside her. In the dim morning light, he looked different, less composed, less untouchable. The sharp edges of his presence were softened, his usually guarded face relaxed in sleep. A quiet pull tugged at her chest, something she wasn't ready to name. Carefully, she slipped from beneath his arm and swung her legs over the side of the bed. The floor was cool beneath her feet as she padded toward the large window overlooking the water. The city skyline was just beginning to wake, golden lights spilling over the distant buildings. The weight of what came next pressed against her. She had agreed to stay, but the question still lingered: what did staying really mean? Declan stirred behind her, the mattress shifting as he sat up. She didn't turn immediately, listening as he ran a hand through his hair before exhaling. "You're awake early," he murmured, his voice still rough with sleep. She glanced over her shoulder, offering a small smile. "I wanted to see the sunrise." He studied her for a moment before pushing the covers aside and moving toward her. When he reached her, he rested a hand lightly against the railing beside her, his presence steady. "Regretting last night?" he asked, his tone unreadable. Wren tilted her head, considering. "No." A flicker of something passed through his expression, and he nodded once. "Good." She hesitated, then turned to fully face him. "But I do need to understand what this is." Declan's gaze didn't waver. "It's whatever you want it to be," she exhaled, searching his face. "That's not an answer." His lips pressed together briefly before he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "I don't do things halfway, Wren. When I want something, I don't waste time pretending otherwise." Her pulse quickened. "And you want this?" His eyes darkened slightly, something firm settling in his stance. "Yes." The certainty in his voice sent a rush of warmth through her, but it also made her nervous. This wasn't a casual fling to him, he had made that clear. And despite the undeniable pull between them, she couldn't ignore the fact that their worlds were wildly different. She crossed her arms, more to steady herself than anything else. What happens when reality sets in? When I have to go back to my life and you go back to yours. Declan didn't hesitate. Then I'll find a way to be in yours. She blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of his response. Just like that. Just like that. Wren let out a slow breath, wishing she could see the world as clearly as he did. But her life wasn't built on certainty, it was built on careful planning, on making sure things were stable before she let herself believe in them. And Declan Lawson was anything but predictable. Still, when he reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, she didn't pull away. For once, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, something unexpected wasn't the same as something impossible. The day unfolded in a way Wren never could have predicted. Instead of hurried goodbyes or awkward explanations, Declan simply included her in his world as if she had always been meant to be there. They had breakfast on the yacht's deck, the sunlight casting a warm glow over the table as Declan poured her coffee without asking how she took it, because somehow he already knew. Later, he took her into the city, weaving through familiar streets with an ease that suggested he had lived in this world of wealth and power for so long that it no longer fazed him. But what surprised her most was how he made sure none of it overwhelmed her. When they passed by an art supply store, he stopped without hesitation, gesturing toward the window display. "You should go in," she frowned. "Why?" His expression was unreadable. "Because I want to see what makes your eyes light up." She hesitated, then stepped inside. Within minutes, she was lost in the aisles, running her fingertips over sketchbooks and pigments she had only ever admired from a distance. When she turned back, Declan was watching her with something close to satisfaction. She narrowed her eyes. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" A small curve touched his lips. "A little." She shook her head, but the warmth in her chest refused to fade. By the time the afternoon stretched into evening, Wren found herself standing beside Declan on the balcony of a quiet rooftop restaurant, looking out over the city. She exhaled, gripping the railing lightly. "This doesn't feel real." Declan glanced at her. "What part?" "All of it." She turned to face him fully. The fact that I was supposed to be on a completely different yacht and instead I ended up here." He studied her for a long moment, then stepped closer, his fingers brushing against hers. "Sometimes the best things happen by mistake." Her chest tightened. "And what if I'm not ready for this?" His hand slid fully over hers, steady and certain. "Then I'll wait." Wren didn't know what to say to that. So instead, she let herself lean into the moment, into the man who had somehow turned a single mistake into something she wasn't ready to walk away from. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of what came next. Wren pressed her palms against the cool metal railing, the city stretching out before her in a shimmering display of golden lights. The rooftop restaurant hummed with soft conversation, the murmur of distant voices and the clinking of silverware melding into the background. Declan stood beside her, his presence steady, unrushed. Her mind spun with everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. The wrong yacht, the unexpected connection, the quiet moments that had unraveled something inside her she hadn't even realized was wound so tightly. Declan shifted slightly, his fingers grazing hers in an unspoken question. She turned, meeting his eyes, and for the first time she let herself acknowledge the truth she had been resisting since stepping onto his yacht. She wanted this. But wanting something and letting herself have it were two very different things. Declan must have seen the hesitation flicker across her face because his voice was quiet when he spoke. "Tell me what you're thinking," she exhaled, her fingers tightening around the railing, "that this is crazy." "Maybe." His thumb brushed the side of her hand, slow and deliberate. "But that doesn't mean it's wrong." She swallowed, searching his face. "You barely know me." His gaze didn't waver. "I know enough." Her pulse quickened. "What if this doesn't work?" "Then it doesn't." Declan's voice remained steady, unwavering. "But I'd rather take that risk than walk away wondering what could have been." Something in her chest clenched at the sincerity in his words. He wasn't asking for forever. He was asking for a chance. And if she was being honest with herself, she wanted to give it to him. Wren inhaled deeply, then finally quietly said, "Okay." Declan studied her, his expression unreadable. "Okay," she nodded, the weight of the decision settling in her bones. "Okay." A slow breath escaped him, as if he had been holding it without realizing. Then, without hesitation, he reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver up her spine, but she didn't pull away. Instead, for the first time in a long time, she let herself lean into something uncertain. Days blurred into weeks, and before Wren had time to fully process the shift in her life, she was standing in Declan's penthouse, a place she never could have imagined herself being just a month ago. The space was sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. It was the kind of place that should have felt cold, impersonal, but somehow, with Declan standing in the kitchen, pouring 2 cups of coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world, it didn't. She leaned against the counter, watching him. "I still can't believe this is happening." Declan handed her the mug, his fingers brushing against hers. "Which part?" "All of it." She took a sip, the warmth settling in her chest. "One wrong turn and suddenly I'm here." He leaned against the island, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe it wasn't the wrong turn. Maybe it was exactly where you were supposed to end up." She rolled her eyes, but there was no real exasperation behind it. "You and your fate theories." Declan arched an eyebrow. "You have a better explanation." Wren hesitated, then sighed. "No." "Then stop fighting it." His voice was gentle but firm. She glanced at him over the rim of her mug, something unspoken passing between them. Maybe he was right. Maybe some things weren't meant to be planned. Maybe some things just were. Weeks turned into months, and before Wren had time to fully question how deeply Declan had woven himself into her life, she found herself standing at the edge of an art studio. Her art studio. She turned in slow circles, taking in the space, the high ceilings, the wide windows, the scent of fresh paint and unfinished canvases. She turned to Declan, who stood near the doorway, watching her reaction carefully. She swallowed hard. "You bought this." Declan's expression didn't change. "No," her brow furrowed. "Then, I leased it in your name." He took a step closer, his voice calm, certain. "It's yours, to do whatever you want with." Wren stared at him, something thick settling in her throat. "Declan, I can't." "You can." He reached for her hand, his grip warm, grounding. "You told me what you wanted. I'm just making sure you have the chance to take it." Emotion swelled in her chest, too much, too fast. She didn't know how to process the fact that someone had listened, had cared enough to make something like this happen without asking for anything in return. She exhaled, her voice quieter now. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything." Declan's lips curved slightly. "Just use it." Wren bit her lip, glancing around the space once more before turning back to him. And then, without thinking, without overanalyzing, she stepped forward and kissed him. Declan stilled for half a second before responding, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her closer, deepening the moment until the rest of the world faded away. When they finally pulled apart, Declan rested his forehead against hers, his breath uneven. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You really don't do things halfway, do you?" He let out a quiet chuckle. "Not when it comes to you." Something inside her cracked at the words, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. A year later, Wren stood on the deck of Declan's yacht, a place she never could have imagined being again, and yet somehow it felt like home. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting golden streaks across the water. Declan stood behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting lightly on her shoulder. She smiled, leaning back against him. "It all started here." His lips brushed against her temple. "Best mistake of my life." She turned in his arms, tilting her head up to meet his gaze. "You never told me what would have happened if I hadn't stayed that night." Declan's expression softened. "I would have found you." Her heart clenched, warmth spreading through her chest. "You're sure about that?" "Positive." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Wren's breath caught. Declan opened it, revealing a simple, elegant ring that caught the last rays of the setting sun. His voice was steady, unwavering. "Stay with me, always." Tears pricked her eyes, but she didn't hesitate. "Yes." Declan slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss, sealing a promise that had started long before either of them had realized it. And as the yacht rocked gently beneath them, Wren knew, without a doubt, that she had never stepped onto the wrong boat. She had stepped exactly where she was meant to be.